All right. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday night. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I know that school year just started. There are folks with kids at home, and it's really nice that you're able to take some time to come out on, we have busy lives. Before we get started, we have a number of people. This is a hybrid Zoom meeting with in-person. Really pleased to see so many participants. So I just wanted to give a quick note that we have multilingual interpretation available on the Zoom, and these are the instructions for anyone who's on Zoom who may need them. There's a button at the bottom that on this slide looks a little blurry, but is a little globe, and you click on that and it puts you into the language channel of your choice. For everyone who wants to hear this presentation in English, that means you also need to select the English selection on the language interpretation. So, if you stay on the default, you won't hear some things that are happening. So if you do have troubles, the chat is open. It's going straight to a number of staff who are offering support right now, and they will funnel your concerns to where they need to go. So again, welcome. My name is Alex Friedman. I'm the acting community development and planning manager for the city of Takoma Park. I am also right now our project lead on our public space management plan process, which is a process that was unfortunately protracted much longer than we expected because of COVID-19. And we're really excited to be finally pulling pieces together and creating something that we can actually respond to. So we invited and selected a team from CH Planning and Spire Green to help us take this plan across the finish line. And tonight I'm really excited that you get to see the first pieces of an actual product. They are just the preliminary, drafty, just getting ideas, floating versions of it. So there's still a lot of iterating and growth that will come from this process. But I'm really excited for it and excited to share it with you. So I'm going to pass it over to our project lead manager, Jordan Exantis. He's going to be our MC and facilitator for the evening. So thank you all again for joining us, and Jordan, take it away.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. Good to be here. Jordan Exantus. I'm an urban planner with CH Planning and Spire Green. Glad to see a few familiar faces in the room, folks who attended our first community meeting, and some new folks as well. Welcome. Hopefully, you all have been keeping track of our progress, but this is just quickly go over an agenda for tonight. We're going to kind of give you a overview of kind of where we've been in the project so far. Talk about some of the components of the project, which is existing conditions, give you an idea of what we've been doing as far as stakeholder engagement, who we've talked to, and then talk about some of the work that we've been doing since the last community meeting, which is really drilling into the analysis of what we've heard, and then using that analysis to develop some recommendations about, where we think the city should be moving in terms of public space management going forward. We want this to be engaging. We don't just want to talk at you. So we are going to have kind of a worksheet exercise. I know it's not going to be quite as fun as the dot exercise on the map that we did in the last meeting, but hopefully it'd be just as important. We ask that, I think it's going to get passed out to folks, right? So if when we get to the the SWOT analysis and the policy analysis, as well as the recommendations, we're going to ask that you kind of react to what you're seeing, and as well as provide your own recommendations. We really believe in, a citizen-driven planning process. So we put some of our ideas, but as Alex was saying, we want to emphasize it's not done. We really want to get many of the ideas to come from the residents themselves. So I encourage you to, put your thinking caps on and help contribute to that process. So As Alex stated, the public safety management plan has been going on for a little while. Where we are now is we completed existing conditions, some policy analysis, and we've kind of put our first draft of recommendations together that you'll have a chance to react to today. And then after this meeting, we'll really be synthesizing all of the feedback and starting to work on the final report that will go before council in October. We'll have further refinements and be done from there. So to give you an idea of the schedule, we started in May, June. We did, site visits and initial meetings, evaluating existing conditions, talking to different stakeholders, and then we've been working to develop, analysis over time. And as I stated, the end of the project should be completed in mid to late October, early November. Not going to go into all of this because this was really the subject of the last meeting, but for those that are new to this process, before you can do a plan, you really need to evaluate existing conditions so that you understand the context in which you're working. So what we did is we took a look at the existing studies that the town has done in the past. We went through the inventory, we looked at demographic information, the amount of streets and sidewalks and the acreage of the parks, how much budget there is for maintaining parks, what kind of, recreational programming exists in town. And then we kind of use community input to fill in the gaps in terms of understanding, what are people's perceptions about what exists in the town? Do they like it? Do they not like it? What do they think needs to be improved? And it really, provides the baseline for, how we frame our plan. So again, kind of more process. As I stated, we started in May at a kickoff meeting. We had a site visit in late May where we met with Housing and Community Development, Department of Recreation, Department of Public Works, as well as the Takoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority and the library. From there, we met with Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, both with the Planning Department and Parks and Rec. As many of you know, or may not know, Planning Department is working on a master plan for the Washington Adventist Medical Campus. And then, the Parks Department obviously owns, roughly half of the park inventory in town. So they are both key stakeholders in this process. We also talked to SHA, who owns, the state highways that run through town, to get their feedback. We had a meeting with youth where we met with local teens and had them do an exercise looking at a map, which I'll show you the outcome of later. We had a community meeting on June 27th that some of you were at. And then since then, we've met with Takoma Main Street, the police department, as well as a focus group filled with residents from multifamily from across Takoma Park to get some specific insights from folks that live in those residences, which brings us to current day. So just to give you an idea, I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but a typical planning exercise that we like to do is create this kind of heat map. We talk to people about, what they like in the town and, have them geolocate their comments to a map. So in this map, you can see the blue is kind of like things that people really like. The red is kind of an area where there may be problems, and the yellow are areas where there may be an opportunity to improve or make, improvements. So as you can see, there's a lot of different comments all across town, some good, some bad, but this is really useful information for us because it begins to give us an idea of how frequently certain places in town are being talked about. And this is a consolidated list across both the youth meeting as well as the community meeting that we held here a couple of months ago. So I'm going to click through this. I don't think we need to go in great detail because I want to give you guys a chance to react, but you can see some of the comments that people made in the, is this the youth meeting? Yeah, this is the youth meeting. it's always interesting to talk to young people because they have different insights about community. They really love Sligo Creek. I think we've heard that across most of our meetings. They were really concerned about traffic, especially along Maple Avenue. Apparently there's some bees that have been harassing them. And they didn't like they thought that the crosswalks could really be improved, especially along New Hampshire Avenue. Um, and in the meeting with the adults, we heard some similar things. People generally like the public spaces in Takoma Park. They felt that they really liked their park. We heard a lot about, water issues, drainage. We heard a lot of people talking about, New Hampshire Avenue having some challenges for pedestrians, and a number of places where some upgrades may be needed. So another really great meeting with some good insights shared. Yes, for sure. So with that, I kind of want to get into the first activity that we're going to do with you all. This is called a SWOT analysis. Hopefully you're familiar with it, but the S in SWOT stands for strengths, W for weaknesses, O for opportunities, and T for threats. And this is a tool that we like to use to kind of begin to provide a framework to issues, and then try to create ways to turn those issues into opportunities, to look at your strengths and how you balance those out against your threats, and really begin to create a baseline of information to craft recommendations. So I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but I do want to talk to a few of them. And then we're going to ask you all to spend a few minutes and do this on your own. And then we'll have a period of reporting back. Folks who are comfortable sharing, we'd like to hear what you have to say. But just to give you a sense, some of the strengths that were identified, and I spoke to this earlier, people really like the parks and public spaces. The trails, especially those in Sligo Creek, are well used. There's a lot of civic pride and community events. People generally felt the community is pretty safe, and there's a lot of engaged residents here. Folks also really like the Sligo Creek Parkway closure. I have to say myself, that's one of the cooler things that I've seen in town since I've been going around. As far as opportunities, we've heard that there's maybe a need to streamline permitting system. There's a lot of kind of informal trails in and around the area. I think there's an opportunity there to maybe provide some better maintenance of those facilities to make them a little safer and more recognizable. There's paper streets, which many of you may be familiar with. I think that presents a great opportunity to do something interesting there. And we heard a lot about native plants. A lot of folks want to see more native plantings and dealing, to deal with some of the invasives, which is one of our threats. Some of the other threats that we saw is a lot of high volume traffic, which makes it a challenge to get around, especially along state highways. There's some challenges with traffic. When we talked to the police department, they did say that there was increasing crime in the area. But overall, I think the sense was that things were generally positive. Some of the weaknesses that I think are really things that could be pretty easily remedied is that people complain of a lack of lighting. We heard that with most folks that we talked to, that lighting should be improved. And there's some, depending on the communities that we talk to, there's kind of a sense that maybe some of the planning in town was dominated by certain demographics, and some needs were not necessarily being coming through the process. So this is just kind of a highlight of what we heard. It's not inclusive of everything, but we want it to be kind of thorough. Can we pass out the sheets and give folks an opportunity to kind of do their own SWOT, and we'll give you guys maybe 5 or 10 minutes to jot down some thoughts, and we'll report back. Sure. Paper streets are roads that were planned, but never developed. So it's it's a right of way that doesn't have development on it. Sometimes it could be just woods or like kind of a clearing, but it's not really serving a purpose right now. So
Okay, everybody, we're going to give you a minute to wrap up. And what we're going to do is ask individuals to report out. And then anybody in the chat, if you don't hear your comment made in the public portion of this meeting, just drop it in the chat and we will make sure that it gets noted. So, thank you.
are folks feeling like they're mostly done? You're getting there? Yeah. Yeah. Does anybody want to report back on their feelings on this exercise, or maybe share a couple points that they added to their SWOT? It's not required, but yes, sir.
Well, I'll backwards here, current clockwise. First, climate change and loss of biodiversity is clear. Erosion, flooded basements, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And that leads into erosion and flooding due to excess stormwater and inadequate infrastructure, both public and private. I think there's a lack of education on how to practically deal with these issues. I think that inadequate engagement by the city with particularly maybe the groups that have something to offer. And I think that a weakness was a failure in incentives around the commission. Springs, we got great, although they're threatened, parks, or creeks, or green spaces, or walking spaces are wonderful. There's a great city with many talented individuals and groups.
All right, thank you. Those are great insights. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Is having a food forest here in Takoma Park somewhere.
Okay.
Encouraging pollinator gardens because our bees are dying. Native plants plays into that. Removing the invasives off our trees. We talk a lot about creating more trees, but let's get rid of the stuff that's killing our trees. And dealing with food insecurity. How do we bring food closer into our city? Food forests, what can we do in our public spaces to encourage people to know how to deal with their grass when they're in their
Right.
Grass beds. Maybe that could be done in one of the parks where we actually do how you can grow stuff in your own yard,
Right.
both gardens and pollinators.
Okay. Those are great as well. I like doing this with this group because you guys are full of ideas. Yes, yes. Okay.
Feel it. Have to walk, elderly people, kids, so looking at planting trees, you feel the difference when you're doing that trees and shit and shade. Also the kind of trees that are planted, some places where they keep the trees out because of the power line. They planted like smaller trees that are really short, they don't really provide the same amount of cooling.
Right.
And they end up encroaching on the sidewalk. So you walk on the sidewalk where the trees are because you can't go through it because it's too low. So that's a thought. And then also another thing to keep is some kind of cooling park, like with a water feature or something.
Splash pad. Yeah. Yeah. No, those are great. So and I've been tasked with trying to repeat all these comments for the folks on the Zooms. It sounds like you want more shade trees to improve tree canopy and access to splash pads for young people. And I would like to say that came out of our youth meeting as well. They said it's really hard to access the pool, so they really wanted access to water to keep cool in the summer. Thank you. Any, oh, here.
And many strengths.
Right.
Which is a rather fragmented city policy thinking that seems to be fragmented based on the organization chart.
Okay.
Say that public spaces that are controlled by the housing and community development are the subject of this plan. But I didn't even see on the map public spaces that are the responsibility of public works and urban forestry.
Right.
The urban forest master plan is being developed over there. And I don't know where, but I bet somewhere a stormwater master plan is being developed.
Right.
Even though stormwater infrastructure would likely go in and under
Right.
green space. So in terms of green space planning and public, we're not like getting everything in the
Right.
same plan.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to the age-old issue of people working in their silos and not necessarily paying close attention to how their work might impact others. And it's important, and honestly, it's one of the hardest pieces of our work is trying to figure out how those pieces fit together and what we can do to encourage, folks to talk to and work with each other. Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's a question for those folks back there. Yeah. Yes.
One thing that hasn't been mentioned here, and I'm not sure I can see if there is an opportunity is just to improve the bike lanes. I have two small kids and I don't plan on driving them around forever and ever. And it'd be great if they can just hop on their bikes and I can feel good about that. But
Right.
the bike infrastructure here is really,
Mm,
it's like thin patches here and there and then it just kind of disappears.
right.
So I think that's a real opportunity. I mean, a lot of the strengths that I have are things that I've already been mentioned, but I really enjoy the walkability, the kind of like pockets of downtown. That you have. I like that. And I absolutely agree that the space next to the junction needs to be developed in some way, shape, or form. It's a missed opportunity to just have it in the parking lot.
Right.
Being of a greater benefit to the community.
Okay. So we heard the junction, something needs to be done with that. I've been kind of steered away from that, so I won't I won't address that. But the bike infrastructure having gaps is definitely an important consideration. I think the same is true for sidewalks, and we've heard that a lot throughout this process. So thank you. I think you were next.
Specifically, the Takoma Park section of the street is like almost unusable by anyone's site. There's so many bars coming out through the pavement.
Right.
And really even bike on it. That is one of our only designated off-road bike spaces. It's unlivable. So that I think is definitely an opportunity to improve. And just like you said, making more of a connected network of ways to get around, except for bikes by a way other than cars. And I have as one of my threats drivers and cars because we all know people drive too fast.
Yeah.
Don't stop at stop signs.
Yeah.
Don't stop for people in crosswalks, and they're never looking for cyclists. And so it's just really, really dangerous. So creating better protected infrastructure for bikes helps keep drivers safer because they're going to have to slow down and pay more attention.
Right.
It helps keep the cyclists safer, and then also helps keep pedestrians safer because you're able to separate from physical barrier.
Yeah. Thank you.
Safe is not protection. Yeah, not just paint.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it sounds like there's some obstructions and kind of degraded facilities, especially on the trails, and again, issues with traffic and overall safety. Yes, ma'am.
You had said earlier about materials used in public spaces. We could maybe with a focus on using light colored materials to reduce the heat island effects.
Okay.
In public space areas. And then another opportunity that I saw is consider replacing the asphalt that's in the junction to co-op parking lot with some permeable pavers and where grass and moss grow through. That space is used, for various community events.
Right.
That many members of the community really enjoy and make an effort to take part in. And the things that they've done during the pandemic to help people who are having food security issues
Mm-hmm.
have been really amazing, and that parking lot has been a key issue. And then behind the parking lot is actually a small chunk of public space that was designated public space I think, in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And so if, I know the parking lot is not considered public space, but if we worked in conjunction at the junction, to maybe get a better surface on that parking lot, that would help with the stormwater issues and the
Yeah.
rock issues and all kinds of other problems that the trees on that slope are having.
Mm. No, that's great. Thank you. I think we heard light colored surfaces to reflect sunlight, reduce heat island effect, as well as reducing impermeable surfaces. Those are great suggestions. Sir?
I get a text from someone who's on the Zoom and they would like a summary of what the comments are that are coming from the room.
Okay.
But, yeah, just, I wanted to confirm that it was in the background documents for the meeting that the 1994 open space plan as adopted really did designate all of the woods behind the parking lot deduction as open space forest buffer. And so I would hope that however the parking lot is handled, that forest really does get not encroached upon. I want to echo the things about bikes and also walkers.
Mm.
I think we should really be thinking in an integrated way about how to reduce trips. And I've seen trips reduced when the steep slope along Columbia Avenue has sidewalks added to it. And in our neighborhood, Pinecrest, the south end, when we were able to just identify just a few missing sidewalk segments, we cut into the street to do it, but didn't add impervious.
Mm-hmm.
But now you see people walking back and forth through the neighborhood with more connectivity all the way to New Hampshire. There are other opportunities like that. For example, right now, in like New Hampshire Avenue, bikeways third and southern segment is being planned, and Sligo Mill Road is a beautiful historic road that could provide a route that's off New Hampshire Avenue and would connect into the district right along a ridge line. So thinking like a biker, thinking like a walker, and making it quicker to get places, or even, an even competition with car,
Yeah.
it's going to get us walking.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think we've noticed the same thing, and I think creating those spurs, the kind of connections, filling some of those gaps. There's definitely a lot of opportunity here to establish more connectivity, and I think it's going to be one of the main recommendations that we talk about later. Anyone else want to share before we move on? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Also, a lot of intersections that are made, and they only have one marked crosswalk.
Mm.
Section on Flower Avenue, I mean, that's kind of unfriendly to pedestrians, people that kind of cross the bus stops and whatnot. Some of the bridges over Sligo Creek that have like two, ample lanes for vehicles, but a very narrow lane for pedestrians to share, and people with strollers are going to be trying to go across there to access the parkway, especially when it's closed. And then also, I haven't heard mentioned, it's less fun than a spray park, but in terms of water, outdoor water fountains, people refill their water bottles, and also public restrooms that are like a step up from a porta potty. Not everyone, can go between 9 a.m. and 4 on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Also, need access to things like that.
Right. No, those are great. I think street furniture, water fountains and those things, it's convenient, but it's also a major, equity thing too, right? Because there are certain people who work or live in the area that may not be able to get to those things easily. So it's important to provide that. Yes, ma'am.
safety and walking safety. One opportunity that the city has is to implement the recommendations from the State Streets Committee
Mhm.
to the city council and staff to implement recommendations for improving the way in which decisions are made about putting in place improved sidewalks and new safety features for bump outs and other traffic calming devices.
Mhm.
Recommendations we made about a year and a half ago. They have the Public Works Department and the lawyer for the city have not yet taken steps to revise the regulations as requested by the mayor and city council.
Mm.
Those would move us quicker towards racial equity based set of recommendations for moving towards better sidewalk improvements in the parts of the city that have been ignored in the past while we can deal with that increase.
Right.
So that would, I think, be a really good improvement.
Mhm.
But it's a weakness that hasn't happened yet.
Mm.
The recommendations are there and the city council endorsed them, and that's haven't gotten, so I'd like to see that happen. It would be really good for public safety.
Yes,
I think the opportunity, that is, waiting is for the public space in front of the Petco building to stop this community center here, which is a big blank
Mm.
shaded space to get some trees and some shade. And Petco hasn't been very cooperative, but, when asked, because they don't want people on that space. but
Right.
it's public space.
Mm.
And it's ugly, and it looks nice. They won't do that, and you can just give us some shade.
Right.
And it's funny that building that is generated. It's also putting out the fighting and really not giving us enough.
Right. It's a bit of, yeah.
Like to see some things in terms of all the new money that it has. I think in terms of acquisition of buildings and spaces that could potentially provide us with new public space in the future. There are a few places in the city where there are underutilized or unutilized empty spaces.
Mhm.
Old buildings that are decrepit and that, but have open space or, old school buildings, that kind of thing.
Right.
Where the city could now house and gain spaces that could really provide us with important opportunities later that could combine housing with open space.
Right.
We could really benefit.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I don't think I can regurgitate such dense comments, but I really appreciate them. Yeah.
Places in Ward 5,
Mm.
in Ward 1 through 4 pretty well. 5 and 6 need some more attention.
Yeah. Thank you. Sir.
Yeah, Ward 6 has a great opportunity, two great opportunities maybe for parks. And the northern end of Ward 6 is the one gap in the, dating back to 2010 master plan. It still doesn't have a playground.
Mm.
One of those is along Ann Street would be with a linear park where the crossroads farmers market is
Yeah.
held. There's about a 20-foot wide strip of grass.
Yeah.
Maybe the street could be narrowed. Another is in this really overly wide T intersection involving like Hammond Avenue and just kind of white office building on campus.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of room there for a play space, and in a sense, maybe that intersection could be closed to create more space.
Okay.
But they've been waiting really long time.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That was one of the places that Alex took us to when we first came to the community. So we're familiar with that one. So I think in the interest of time, we want to kind of keep things moving. I really appreciate everyone thinking long and hard about this exercise. I think you guys have generated a lot of great feedback. I'm gonna turn over the mic to my colleague Laura, longtime colleague and park planning expert, who's gonna talk through some of our policy analysis.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Laura Conley, for the record, and I'm here to discuss some of the things that I looked at in regard to policies and ordinances in the city of Takoma Park. And I thought that you guys have a very good, robust inventory of programs that you looked at, including mandatory replacement of trees. You're working on your urban forestry and canopy initiatives right now. There are policies for invasive species. There's policies for non-invasive species. You know, how do you manage your grass? There's noise control. There are stormwater management efforts, snow removal, traffic calming, recreation code of conduct, missing sidewalk reports. So, you know, you have really taken a great amount of care and initiative in looking at existing policies and comparing them with cities of similar size throughout the region or other plans and policies that are being enacted. I think Takoma Park is very well suited for strategies moving forward. I think if I move on, areas for consideration. Maybe you look at prioritizing what is most important. Is it, you know, there's cost associated with removing invasive species. There's costs involved with street tree planting, with street light replacement, water fountains, restrooms, all the things that we're talking about here. So we need to maybe prioritize and decide what are the highest priorities in the community. You know, what do you want to do on your own and what can you look at alternatively? In looking through all the guidelines and the documents, I did not see any thresholds for open space. Currently, there is about 120 acres of parkland in Takoma Park. There is maybe 20 acres owned by the city of Takoma Park, 100 acres owned and managed by Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. When you do the math, that works out to be about 6 acres per every 1,000 population in the city. And that's not a bad ratio. The National Recreation Parks Association recommends NRPA. They recommend almost 10 acres per 1,000. So Takoma Park is a little lower than the national average, but National Park and Recreation Association also states that the community should look at their internal needs and decide what is their right ratio. So as you move forward, like everybody will say, oh, we need more parks, but you have to look at your budgets. You have to look at, you know, how are we going to implement this? And if it's something that is too much of a burden for the city of Takoma Park, maybe then that's where the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission could come in and be of assistance to help acquire and develop parkland within the city. But I did not see in your policies any provisions for future growth in that park land area. You know, where do we want to buy land? I did see there was an initiative to look at vacant lands and revitalizing vacant lands and, you know, what could be done moving forward. So I think that's a very good, strong opportunity for the city of Takoma Park to pursue and say, are vacant lands going to be sold and redeveloped? Are they going to be used for stormwater management? Are they going to be parkland? What becomes of these lands? So there's a way there to integrate. We also looked at permitting for events and use of public space. I think there is some skeleton permitting there, but then there could be broader, bolder policies put into place too about roads. And one of the things, just out of curiosity, show of hands, would anybody have any interest in a car-free day in Takoma Park? Oh, we got a little bit of interest, you know, set aside one day a year. Like, let's just like tone down the cars in the, maybe you couldn't do it on the state highways, but maybe back in the neighborhoods, you know, try an effort. Another show of hands, stormwater management seems to be an issue. How many people would be willing to give up green space or active parkland for stormwater features? Well, sometimes, you know, stormwater management requires a pond, it requires a holding area for quantity of water. Sometimes is anybody interested in giving up any green space for stormwater management?
There's a paid space. I mean, I think there are alternatives.
There are, you can put it under parking lots, you can put it, have a field and provide something under it.
In a multi-resident area, maybe with some public and private lanes working together, it makes
Mhm.
sense to do what you're suggesting with storage, stormwater, in a mini water pit. That makes a lot of sense.
So as we move forward with recommendations, it's not only looking at stormwater management, but integrating stormwater management thoughtfully into the public open space. Okay,
I just want to comment that, maybe over 80%, maybe 90% of our stormwater is being generated on private property and flowing down there and building canopies there and things vegetation there. Has to be the next wave. As you've seen, Takoma Park has built out a lot of catchments streetside, and there's a limit to what those can do.
Mhm.
Also, it doesn't have to even do this work. We can open up space under streets for catchments, or we do something like the bottom of Maple Avenue where there's a floodplain. There could also be a pavilion on top of that, for like dances or something.
So you're very interested in progressive stormwater management that incorporates some of the existing infrastructure and accomplishes stormwater management goals.
Yeah, a lot of education, a lot of residents want to do the right thing in something what it is, and they don't haven't been incentivized to maybe work with their neighbors,
Mhm.
or with the city. So
Okay.
opportunities there.
Okay, and my last question was stormwater management. How many people are interested in doing it on private lots rather than the public space? Like some people might say, oh, I'm a contributor to stormwater management. I'd like to see my driveway replaced with a pervious surface that will allow runoff.
I just have a comment that I think we have to identify a whole bunch of tiny watersheds where the
Mhm.
uphill and downhill people have been together.
Mhm.
And so if it's private, it can't just be one person, it has to be.
Sure. But the city may, or even the county may be able to offer incentives to do green roofs, to do, take up your driveway and put in permeable pavement, those types of things. There are ways to do it. Some people put rain gardens on their private lots. Some people buy cisterns. Go ahead.
Water events
Mhm.
require more than just rain gardens.
Right.
Engineering, the city can facilitate city private cooperative, like proposing, especially in like those areas where there's hills,
Mhm.
where you're gonna need some heavy engineering to fix that.
Okay.
And providing incentives is gonna be the key.
Okay.
And technical assistance. So, I mean,
Okay.
impervious paving, I think, like, at least about slow sand filters done down
Okay.
these driveways.
Okay. Moving on with my policy analysis, criteria for future public space. Again, what are you think you're missing? You talked about some bike lanes today. Are you interested in more open space, parkland? Certainly circulation is a very big interest. I think, to be successful with a public space management plan, you have to continuously get feedback from the public. How do you want to see things used? Do you need festival space? Is the priority bikeways? So you constantly try to gather input and let that be your guide. And somebody here mentioned all the competing plans and interests. So the point of public input is to start to emphasize what's most important. Is it tree canopy? Is it stormwater management? Is it bikeways? Okay. And then finally, community focused events. I think that I did not see, I know you guys have programs for pretty robust celebrations throughout the community throughout the year. There be more focus on, like I said, maybe a day where no cars, or like environmental day where you go out and do invasive species management, et cetera?
Good for a long time that Park doesn't have a dedicated space that's flat for community events or for informal community events that happen. When we do our events, we have to close streets and have a police presence to do that. And it's surprising to me that we don't seem to have ever created that space. We got close to it when we built this building, but then we ended up with the moat, you know.
Okay, and then the very last comment that I want to make is focus on redevelopment. As redevelopment happens in the community, what is the criteria? Should there be fees paid for tree planting, for open space, should new developments have to provide public space? Should they maintain their own roads? You know, what is that looking like moving forward? And those are things that I thought the city of Takoma Park may want to explore in a little more detail. And those are just some like very high level recommendations, food for thought, that Jordan is going to present in the next section with our recommendations.
There's a question online, wanting to know what the national average for parkland per 1,000 for urban.
Again, National Parks and Recreation Association doesn't distinguish urban and non-urban. They simply recommend 10 acres per 1,000. And again, you can adjust that above and below based on your needs. You know, some places may be adjacent to another jurisdiction. Like I will use Greenbelt, for example. The city of Greenbelt has their own parkland, but then right next door, just outside of the municipal boundary, is the National Park Service Greenbelt Park. And that's 1,100 acres of parks land green space. So it depends on where you're sitting and what your geography is and what you have access to of what your ratios may be. So don't let that standard kind of scare you, but also be thoughtful about where you have access to other parks and recreational opportunities. Question in back.
Yeah, can you just tell me how green space is defined? So, you know, does it have to be a green space that after we use like community, like how do you define?
In this case, I took park land, anything that was designated as a park or an open space to be used by the community that is operated by the city of Takoma Park or the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission in this county. And I looked at everything in the municipal boundary. So there may be some spaces that you take advantage of that are open space, like maybe the school property. I did not go and calculate school property into this open space calculation. So you may be operating a little higher if you have ball fields on school property that you're taking advantage of. Somebody mentioned some space that is used flex-wise for parking. Again, those types of spaces, or like the Adventist Hospital site, if that has some open areas on it that will be redeveloped, you know. There could be plazas in the city. I did not include those because my experience tells me those can go away at any time. You know, maybe they won't, but my thought process was just to use the designated parkland. Other questions? Okay, I'm going to continue on, Jordan.
All right.
Thank you for that.
Before we jump into recommendations, the kind of second page of your homework assignment here is talking about. Oh, I'm sorry. I got too comfortable. So before we move into recommendations, we'd like to ask folks to react to what they heard about city policies, but really just want to get some kind of anecdotal information from you all about oh, there goes the computer. Do you have any challenges or concerns with existing city policies regarding public space management? And what improvements to existing policies are needed? So there's two questions here. We're going to get into recommendations next, but the questions related to policies, if you could spend a few minutes jotting down some comments. Does anybody want to share any thoughts about city policies before we move on to the next exercise? Yes, ma'am.
I think one of the challenges is not being very flexible,
Mm,
not being, we have a climate change emergency thing documented into our city.
right.
I don't see that. I don't see that when we make decisions. I don't see that in responding to things and going fast enough. As we watch the world go up in fire and floods, I think we do focus on that. And I think the lack of really making use of our residents,
Mm,
we have an incredible group of people that live in the city.
right.
And I just don't think our city has created a way to really integrate that force of people that do that. And one of the things is like, well, example, Dorothy's Woods, which I'm sure you guys looked at.
Yeah.
2 years ago, we asked the city and said, we would like to put a pollinator garden in there.
Mm-hmm.
We could even put it in pots. Took them 2 years to respond to us, and then when they came back,
Mm,
we have to have 10 days before to get every volunteer signed up
Hmm.
to be able to go in there and pull the basics. That's not an emergency response to me.
yeah.
It doesn't make the 50 families that we had ready to go in there work, being able to create that project. So I think there has to be, if you're gonna do something, please, let's make sure we have deadlines, what we're gonna do, and make use of this incredible, group of people that live in this city.
Yeah. I agree. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Very briefly, another example of that is the mountain biking trail group that is partnered with them and CPC, big mountain biking trails. I don't know what everybody feels about this, but my son had many friends who were into that. During the pandemic, there have been at least a couple of informal trail circuits that I guess teenagers or middle schoolers have built in woods off of Elm Avenue and off of Jefferson.
Mm,
I don't know what could happen to those. I don't know whether they were built properly. But kids are looking for places to do things like that. It's great. It can be outdoors. It doesn't threaten tree roots.
right. All right. Thank you.
Obviously, public engagement and community engagement is important because we're all here and sharing our thoughts.
Yeah.
But also at a certain point, I think it can become kind of a self-defeating problem where we keep getting so much engagement. No, well, the first round of engagement wasn't enough, so we need to get more engagement. No, that second round wasn't equitable enough, so we need to go back and do another round. And then, but at that point, it's been, 2 years or, I don't know, 25, and we still haven't done anything. And
Right.
so I think particularly given crises like the climate change problem, at a certain point, people in city leadership have to have, frankly, the guts to stand up and say, okay, we've heard you, and this is the direction we're going, period, end of story. We're not going to keep talking in circles and circles for the next several decades about one issue or another. It's a pretty straightforward thing, like a pollinator garden that seems to match everyone's, I'm not saying public engagement, but like the problem, but just as a hypothetical, at a certain point, we need to be able to cut it off and move on and recognize that we're a big diverse community and not everyone is going to be happy with every decision, but that's what.
Right. Okay. Yes.
I think our city has a great opportunity to be a model for other cities of the same size or even a little smaller or a little bigger.
Mm,
As other people mentioned earlier this evening, there are times in the thing, first and president, where it doesn't seem like the left hand is what the right one's doing. And there's a definite disconnect between staff and the elected officials.
mm,
And we've got to figure out a way to remedy that, otherwise we're gonna keep creating bad examples, like this building that is 15, the river that runs through it. And that's a real problem. And then as far as equity goes, if there are going to be other meetings about public space, perhaps we could have them in a site in Ward 5 or Ward 6 to be able to bring in residents
Yeah,
from that area. Because as you can see from folks in this room, you're definitely getting more of one demographic than the other.
right.
Just want to build on that a little bit, and it was referenced earlier about having goals, but then having strong performance metrics.
Mm,
You know, it's more than aspirational, more than we really wanted. We should have, that will help moving things along. If we have agreed that we're measuring this, it's important, and the council and the city manager are judged on performance.
right.
And that also touches on our budgeting process,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little bit difficult for us to know. I think, we speak for myself and for others, to know what do you want. I mean, there's, you want public works, but it's what project, so project-based budgeting, I think would help us do it as Laura recommended, I think, about helping to define those higher priorities.
Right.
What are our priorities? Well, that, if we have project-based budgeting, perhaps it will help.
Okay. Anyone else want to share, sir?
There seems to be a sort of clear policy on how ensuring like the city investments, like in public space, fiscally sustainable.
Mm.
It's great to take things on, but we honestly assess the long-term impact on the city from that. Public space.
Okay.
Can I add that connects with this story about Dorothy's Woods. The city, I'm grateful that it's purchased 2.5 acres of it. It's a beautiful piece of land, but they don't have staff to take care of it.
Right.
They really don't have the time, and so the invasives grow there. And only because of volunteers that now have to sign 10-day waivers that helps that process. In addition to the fact that the base of Dorothy's Woods, there's a blacktop, a degraded blacktop,
Mm,
impermeable surface. So there's a couple of, this is a stormwater issue,
right.
it's a recreational, and huge opportunity for the city to be recognized as ahead of doing the right thing around climate change, and I think educating our youth. Point opportunities there to be taken.
Yeah. Okay.
And just to add to that, it's contiguous to the block from the school, which is possibly one of those places that could be redeveloped, and it has open space. It is not. Oh, it is, but we purchased it. No, she's not in selling, there's already not something.
I want to make sure my statement is taken in the way that I intended.
Yeah.
Well, this Dorothy's Woods. The city's taken it on, so it's a long-term liability. There was no sort of assessment of what's the positives that are come out of that. I mean, so it doesn't seem that was done.
Mm.
Now the city's sitting on property that it doesn't really know what to do with. That has an ongoing maintenance obligation that it actually can't pay for.
Mm,
And there might have been other opportunities to realize more value out of that
right.
by leaving it in the private. And that would have been an option that should have been explored and in the public way.
Right.
Sort of taken on this, is what we're going to do, and
Yeah.
this is where we are now.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, sir.
The city needs to be looking now, in terms of development that's gonna happen on the north and east side, really looking outward to how the new mixed-use development is coming. How will those new neighborhoods and new residents be integrated with the residential neighborhood adjacent? And, in my area, Pinecrest, we fully expect that once rapid transit comes through, the whole stretch from Poplar to Eastern Avenue will will be redeveloped. Right now, there's vacant grassy commercially zoned lot that connects straight through to the community park at Orchard Avenue.
Mm,
The city could be proactive in saying, where can you get open space funds?
right.
Keep that wonderful connector available, you know, and I'm sure things like that, they exist in Ward 6 as well. We think creatively about how the Saul property connects with the neighborhood behind it.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else before we jump into recommendations? All right. So again, we're gonna do something similar. We've kind of broken our recommendations in the following categories. This doesn't capture everything, but you know, based on the kind of scope of work as it's written, we have general recommendations, things that are relating to like legal issues, like uses, you know, use permits, right of way, things of that nature. We talk about acquisition, planning and community engagement, maintenance and operations, development, fundraising and capital budgeting, and sustainability. So again, these lists are not meant to be exhaustive, but just kind of a peek into some of our thinking. And this is largely based on conversations that we've already had with the community. But some of the top recommendations that came out was to prioritize new sidewalk development in the school walk sheds, to improve accessibility to public spaces and identify opportunities for ADA upgrades. For those that aren't familiar, ADA is the requirements for, you know, people with disabilities to have accessible facilities for folks who have handicaps and disabilities, identify new opportunities for pedestrian connections, add interpretive signage to inform local community, add more variety to the existing park system to improve the overall level of service for different user types, to improve pedestrian scale lighting to support safety and visibility, to improve wayfinding at trails, parks, connections, and major destinations, and to establish an official protocol to work with different city agencies to review and update the city's public space inventory. So keep that in mind. We're going to walk through these. Oh, yes. So it's, I don't know what's going on here. That's a recommendation that came from the community, but basically they want to, you know, when you have parks and different things, a lot of times you'll see, you know, like a sign that kind of explains, it might be the history of the place, or it might talk about, you know, the ecology of the place, or give you some, you know, ability to learn about, you know, where you are, depending, and it could be a cultural thing, it could be a lot of different things, but, you know, interpretive sign is just a catch-all for, you know, educational kiosk. Yeah. I don't know what's going on now. Is this? Oh, okay. Sorry about that. A little bit of technical difficulties.
Turn on the closed captions again. I think.
How do you do that?
More show subtitle.
All right. I swear we've done this before. So some of the legal recommendations to look at the lease agreements and long-term maintenance agreements and try to determine some ways to improve parkland management on MNC PPC owned parkland. You have to forgive me, this is kind of coming in and out. Allow and promote the activation of public space in areas outside of Old Takoma Park, to create a public space stewardship guide to help residents and other stakeholders navigate regulatory processes, and consolidate permit responsibilities and streamline processes. Those are some of the legal recommendations. Hopefully this will go to the next page. Yes.
Can you talk about what those agreements are?
So I could speak to this and Laura as well. We both used to work for park and planning, essentially for the park and planning owned lands. A lot of times, you have an option. MNC PPC can maintain and do everything on that property. Some cities decide, well, we'd like to take more control or ownership over maintenance, programming, so on and so forth. There's all different types of use agreements for those spaces, right? So it can be anything from, hey, you guys take care of it, to, hey, we want to take some ownership over it. So it's really up to the municipality how those public spaces get managed. And those agreements can be looked at. I think some are 5, some are 10 years. It just really depends. But it is something that, if there's interest in changing how a space is maintained or programmed, those conversations can be had with park and planning. I know that, for example, sometimes a community center, the town will want to take control of it because they want to have more influence over how it's programmed and who gets to use it, who gets access to it. They want to hold the keys, so to speak. And so that's, yeah.
So could that cover something like, so could Takoma Park have control over, say, like trails into Sligo, for instance?
Yeah, definitely. Provided, park and planning was amenable. So acquisition, I know we've heard a bit about this tonight. Some of the recommendations are to develop community thresholds for public space acquisition, maintenance and management, including a ration of public space per person, and identify areas that could become potential acquisition targets for future park and public space development. So I'm seeing some smiles. Hopefully that's a good thing. I know we've heard a few things, and I think as we go through the next exercise, if folks want to give specifics, we'll definitely welcome those comments. Planning and community engagement. Hopefully this will come up. So first recommendation, it'll hopefully pop up soon, is to establish an outreach strategy that mobilizes and engages with ethnic minorities and low-income residents to prioritize the needs of the most vulnerable in the planning process, to expand the Safe Routes to School program, to conduct safety analysis and recommendations to complete the sidewalk network, activate use of paper streets to host small-scale programs and events and potential development, implement an open streets program that provides programming throughout different neighborhoods in Takoma Park, create an equity review process for the design and implementation of public art, work with state and regional bodies such as Park and Planning and SHA to elevate public awareness of their public space facilities and programming, foster and promote nature-based education and recreation programs across all ages, and work with community organizations to provide information about the permitting process for temporary events and uses on public space. Moving on to maintenance and operations. Some of the key recommendations are to consider establishing a Parks and Recreation Department or establish clear protocols to ensure that the Department of Recreation has more influence in park planning and development. For those of you who don't know the inner workings, one of the things we heard when we first spoke with the city is that we have a Department of Recreation, and then Public Works is dealing with a lot of the park maintenance. But even though the Department of Recreation folks deal with a lot of the programming and the people, they're not having a large role in the actual planning and development of park spaces. So there's a desire to kind of, close that gap and create some more collaboration there. Create an improved maintenance strategy and identify a revenue source for city-owned forests and open space with a focus on removing invasive species. Implement equity considerations into the development and update of a bus shelter development and maintenance plan. Develop a review process to evaluate recreational program demands and gaps, and adjust programming to meet changing needs and community makeup, and address encroachments in sidewalk from tree roots, shrubs, and other things such as utilities. Development. So the key recommendations here is to establish a need-based playground, park equipment, and infrastructure replacement system that's based on existing conditions and equity considerations. Establish policies to guide development away from precious greenways and open spaces. Create guidelines on how open space will be incorporated into future development and redevelopment efforts, and develop a strategy to put existing utilities underground. I heard some murmurs. I think that last one's important. We heard from a lot of folks, especially those that live in multifamily, that they have a hard time getting around town on the sidewalks because they can't fit a wheelchair on a sidewalk. They have to go on the road, and it's really hard for them to get around.
The holes in the side of the, if that comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. So the fundraising and capital budgeting, the recommendation are to promote transparency in the city's public space management budget by listing projects, initiatives, and programs by ward, and to look for grant dollars to match with existing city budgets to help take on larger projects. And lastly, the sustainability recommendations is to implement more green stormwater infrastructure in public spaces and reduce impervious surfaces where possible. Increase native plants in public spaces and create incentives for property owners to plant native plants in right-of-way strips. Create design guidelines for electrical charging stations to allow stations to match the local feel and look of the city and to be aligned with ADA requirements. Develop an official threshold for desired and attainable tree canopy coverage, and support and supplement the city maintenance efforts to improve erosion control and control of non-native invasive species. Ugh. So, and deer, nobody's out shooting those things, no? Yeah. 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 Okay.
But they don't come down to Takoma.
Huh. Huh. Yeah.
There are ways that they can reduce your herd.
Yes, and we should be looking at that.
Mm.
Part of our problems in the parks. What are those ways?
I will follow up with Montgomery County.
Yeah, I think we really need it in our city.
Mm.
I've been reporting areas for the last 5, I can't even.
They're eating.
I can't keep the plants I've had, for 40 years.
Huh. Eating your garden up, huh? Huh.
For the city to start a conversation about.
The police, the Takoma Park Police brought in a speaker on here from DNR.
Huh.
That speaker said Takoma Park could do things if there were an outcry.
It's also become a public health hazard with Lyme disease.
Yeah, the ticks, right? Yeah. Mm.
Look, I'm thinking about the criteria. It seems like there are many boxes the city of Takoma Park checks with your management, but the one wild part is, there isn't a big block of open space. Like somebody said to shoot or to, but there are other alternatives that they can.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anything that even talks about here. Maybe I haven't seen it, but I don't think it's even been brought up as an issue.
Hmm. Well,
Oh, really?
Like three years ago.
hmm. Well, it'll definitely be in this plan. Uh,
Yes. And, I will follow up with the city and with Montgomery County tomorrow.
So,
Yeah.
you know, who to contact, yeah, I didn't know whether it would fall under the arborist, the gardener,
It's
you know.
probably DNR or something, no?
For example, as well, where resident involvement and engagement to quickly identify where the herds are. You know,
Yeah.
People know where the herds are bedding down.
Mm,
I just wanted to share an anecdote, which I don't have a solution to, but there are some really large trees behind Piney Branch Elementary that are being strangled by some kind of vine.
mm,
And I called the Department of Public Works to say these trees are being strangled. And I was told, well, those trees they're either on school property or they're on property that belongs to some other park department that is not DPW's, not the cities, it's either the schools or it's.
or it's,
county.
yeah.
Not my problem.
Mm,
You have to figure out who to call to report that, and we can't do anything about it. And, you know, I mean, all these different people knew that it was somebody else's problem.
right,
We're all looking at those trees that are basically providing shade to the kids in the school
right,
and the people using that public space. And they're really big trees that are, you know, providing stormwater management and shade to these two really critical recreation and school areas.
right,
And all those people are looking at those trees every day. And I don't know who to call, but it seems to me like somebody in our city government ought to want to solve that problem.
Right.
We're all looking at the trees being strangled. So I did not figure out how to solve it, but that to me is a public space and stormwater management and tree canopy management.
Yeah.
And it's still not solved.
yeah,
And
Similar problem in Opal Daniels Park, right
Mm.
behind my house. We had like 3 or 4 trees fall. One, as my children were playing in the woods, right behind my playground,
mm,
sorry, right behind my backyard. And we called Martin, who's the arborist for Takoma Park, and he got us in touch with Montgomery County Parks. And when it took them a while to respond, we called Marty back, and he followed up with them, and then they showed up for quite a few reasons. So Marty might be a good, I think Marty might be a good advocate, but it's from, yeah. So that's where anybody who has,
I don't know who's, I mean, I don't think it was the city's tree.
right,
And
No,
maybe it's not, and maybe it's not.
The Opal Daniels, no, it's not, the Opal Daniels, well, Opal Daniels is owned by Montgomery Park.
Yeah.
And so it was, but he was still helpful.
yeah. No, it's an important issue. All right, well, before folks run out of here, we would like to ask that you spend a little bit of time responding to what you've heard with regard to recommendations. And if you have additional ideas of things to be added to any of these categories, I'm gonna put the categories back on the screen again. If you could please share those ideas so that we can have them in our record, we'll make sure they're incorporated into what we prepare. Yes, sir.
So I'm not, a little more thoughtful, and there are a lot of ideas there, and if I had that list, then we could hand out or probably something that I can find on the website.
Yeah, we can organize that, you know, we gave Alex that list, yesterday, I believe, and we can send it out to meetings that we, if you want to, you know, spend some time, let them think about it and send it out. I personally, yeah, we really appreciate it, thank you.
And we'll be posting the slides and the digital version of the worksheet that you're working on, which is what the virtual folks have been
And now the recommendation.
With these slides, yeah. So it'll just be these fairly done.
And
Yeah.
so then the mechanism to respond to that would be created or what?
There will be a survey link that's formatted the same way as these two exercises, but feel free to, drop things in there. Or it's not, you can email me directly off the.
Well, it's not just me, I just want.
Right,
a
no.
number of people that might-
We'll have it posted online for a few weeks so that people who weren't able to make it or need more time can process it a little bit.
I just checked online and the deer sharpshooter program is gonna be in Sligo Creek, but outside the
Yeah.
Beltway
Yeah.
and at the Sligo Creek Ball.
So we just need to herd them.
Well,
Herding them out, Sligo and volunteers times 400.
I don't want to come across like I'm excited about bow hunters or whatever, but I know we have coyotes, but I don't see the coyotes taking the weak members of the herd.
Mm-mm.
They don't seem to be that kind of a predator.
You need wolves for that, I think. Yeah. Yes.
That also just reminded me of another anecdote where a neighbor has here caught his leg on the fence.
Hmm.
So she called the city. The city said, call the police. The police said, call the county.
Hmm.
And it just went round and round and round, and nobody knew. And meantime, the deer, as unwelcome as they are, it was suffering.
Right.
And so it'd be nice when you pick up the phone and you're talking to the city staff member, instead of saying, well, it's not my problem, you need to call somebody else.
Right.
If there could be more of an effort to even keep a list of those somebody else's.
Right.
And wildlife.
Yeah.
Great.
It's also in that deer management page for Montgomery County, there is a number on there for deer related emergencies.
Right, and so, but the city staffer didn't know that.
Right.
Didn't put it,
Usually on those wildlife issues, my experience has been, there is a call to DNR, and they will send out somebody who will respond and, do what's necessary to address the animal.
Right, and in this particular case, DNR said, you're an incorporated city, you deal with it. So that's one of the downsides of being this little independent city, this little pretty fun place that we call home. People can say, well, that's a county problem, or that's a city problem, why are you calling it?
It sounds like we need to create some sort of guide, both for residents and maybe for city folks to figure out how to respond to certain issues in different places. Yes, sir.
It occurs to me that when we talk about deer, we talk about invasives, we talk about stormwater, that all of these are related to ecosystem.
Right.
The ecosystem sustainability, but unfortunately, our sustainability director spends almost all of her valuable time on energy issues.
Mhm.
And I applaud that. Our carbon footprint is important, but the whole area of ecosystem sustainability, loss of biodiversity
Right.
is not, I mean, it crosses over different departments and therefore nobody's seeing it in a whole strategic way.
Mhm. Yeah. I hear you.
So maybe a recommendation as a plan would be to establish inside the city a working group that looks holistically at those issues, like one person from Public Works, one person from the Green Team, one person from Parks, and they get together and they meet on a routine basis and they say, you're gonna handle this, I'm gonna handle that, you're gonna do this. So there's some silo breaking and more interagency collaboration, intercity
I
collaboration.
think that the great and engagement with the people, impacted people and the active groups that have something to offer in that area.
Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for allowing us to listen to you tonight. I think it was very worthwhile and looking forward to putting together the rest of our. Thank you.
Ready, you wanna collect any?
Yeah, if folks have put their comments in, we can collect those. And yeah, again, really appreciate everyone for showing up tonight and taking the time to talk through this plan with us. And as far as next steps, you can look forward to seeing something close to completion in October. Yeah, best of luck to everybody.